Good evening, everyone. I wish to respectfully recognize the Coast Salish nations upon whose traditional territory we are located this evening. The first item on the agenda tonight is calling the public hearing for Monday, December the 5th to order. And I'm going to ask the corporate officer to introduce the public hearing process and the first item on the agenda, Bylaw 2000.103. Mrs. Keller, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Local Government Act requires that a public hearing be held before Council adopts an amendment to the zoning bylaw or official community plan bylaw. Copies of the Director of Community Planning's report and related information respecting the subject amendment bylaw have been available for public examination at the offices of the Planning Department, in the Parksville Civic and Technology Centre, and on the City's website. At this public hearing, all persons who deem their interest in property affected by the proposed bylaw shall be afforded an opportunity to be heard on matters contained within the bylaw. Anyone wishing to be heard on a specific bylaw amendment must come to the microphone at the appropriate time and clearly provide their name and civic address. Council members request that speakers restrict discussion to the application on hand, which is to the proposed use of the land. Members of Council may ask questions of persons after they have made their presentation. However, the main function of Council members this evening is to listen to the representations and not to engage in debate. Whether you are for or against any particular bylaw, during the course of a public hearing, Council respectfully asks that you do not display any outbursts as a courtesy to all present this evening. No presentations or submissions will be received by Council on this application after the motion for termination of the public hearing has been adopted.
So there's been no comments up till tonight. Okay. Okay. First of all, I want to invite anyone in the audience who would like to speak to come forward to the microphone and give their name and civic address for the record on the bylaw 2000.103. For a second time, I would like to invite anyone who would like to speak to come forward. And for a third and final time, I would like to invite anyone who would like to speak to come forward to the microphone on this particular bylaw, which is the Zoning and Development Bylaw 2016, number 2000.103. Okay, I'm going to ask for a motion to terminate the public hearing for Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2016, number 2000.103. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Beale. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay. So now, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're welcome to the December 5th regular meeting of Council. We have a few items. Oh, I'm sorry. Before I move on, I need an adjournment. I need a mover and a seconder to adjourn the public hearing. Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Burden. All those in favor? Thank you. We are adjourned. All right. Starting over again, I want to welcome everybody to the December 5th regular meeting of Council. I have to go through a few things this evening, Council, before we get to our delegations. We have two delegations this evening. So first of all, I need a mover and a seconder for the minutes of the Council meeting held November 21st, 2016. I have a mover and a second. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Powell. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. I need an approval of the agenda this evening. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the approval of the agenda? Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Burden. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Thank you. Okay, the first item that we have on your agenda is the appointment of acting mayors, and I don't think I need to go through it. It's for the entire year, starting on December the 6th to March 31st. Do I have a mover and a seconder for approving from A to F? Moved by Councillor Beale, seconded by Councillor Salter. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Thank you. All right, we're moving right along here. The next, we have committee appointments. Each year at the first council meeting in December, the mayor recommends annual voting and liaison appointments to boards, commissions, and associations, and required appointments to the parcel tax review. So the first thing that we're going to do is the council appointments by the mayor. Do I have a mover and a seconder for those recommendations? Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Powell. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Next we have the parcel tax review panel, which would be composed of myself, Councillors Beal, all of the Councillors Beal, Burton, Oates, Patterson, Powell, and Salter. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Salter. All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. The next on the item is appointments to boards, commissions, and associations. Do I have a mover and a seconder for all these appointments? Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Beal. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. All right. There is a change on item J of your report, which now appoints Councillor Salter to the Parksville and District Historical Society, and I need a mover and a seconder for the rest of those recommendations. Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Oates. All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. Okay, moving right along, members of council. We have two delegations tonight. The first delegation is the Parksville Community and Conference Center, and we have a presentation by the Executive Director, Margaret Spruit. Margaret, do you have anybody with you coming to the microphone? Okay, and that is Mr. Roy. Okay, welcome. And you have the floor.
Good evening. I have gone back through the 2017 and the 5-year budget. You have the new figures in front of you. Basically, there was some errors in the other one. One of them was the system wasn't tallying them properly. I would like to thank Lucky Butterworth. He did review it and set me some suggestions, which we have both concurred that all the figures are correct now. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for revisiting it and recognizing the work that Lucky had. Lucky had some questions he directed towards me as the liaison to the society, and I was not able to answer them, so hopefully you can provide the answers to those tonight. The revenue increases from 2018 to 2021, they're averaging about an increase of about 8% per year. And that seems like to be a little bit optimistic compared to the other years. And one of the concerns that we as the city would have is if you don't achieve those revenue expectations, and the requisition to the city will go up incrementally. So, you know, is that a realistic forecast for the revenue increases?
Well, as you know, we now have implemented a plan that we do an annual increase. So what we did was we calculated the increase as well as a percentage for new bookings.
And there's also the requisition from the city is about the same in 2017 as 16, but is increasing by almost 5.82% in 2018, primarily due to the increases in the staffing costs. Then the requisition stays pretty flat for the next 2 years. Optimistic revenue increases are keeping the requisition fairly flat over 2018. Again, if those requisitions are not achieved, the requisition will go up unless costs are reduced. So we're hoping that the society has a plan to address that not happening.
Yes, we do. We're planning on doing some fundraiser events during the year, which will offset some of the things. We've been very successful when we've done this before, so I'm assuming that we will be successful again.
Okay, thank you. I have one last question, if I might. I'll take that as a yes. This is just a clarification. The sound and audio equipment is showing up in the budget as 2019, but I thought you told us before it was going to be done this year. Just some clarity on that.
Well, it was scheduled, but as Lucky pointed out, that we had a grant, and he suggested that we use the grant money towards the floor. And he said that I should push it back because the money that you guys give us is, he was telling me to use the grant money as your portion of the payment for that. So that's why we pushed the audio and sound back.
To 2019 as well?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Margaret, and thank you for the work you put into this. And it's regrettable that Lucky is not here because I know he did a lot of work with you in the background. So that's all my questions. I'll make the proper motion at the right time.
Would you like to do that now, or? I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry. Questions, Councillor Burton.
So, further to what Councillor Oakes was saying with regard to the revenue, your own revenue increases, I'm just looking at your historical budget versus actual, and in 2014 you were $17,000 shy with your actual over your budget. In 2015 you were almost $25,000 shy, and if we do some projections through to the end of this year based on your 9 months at 73,000 and your budget of 128,000, you're probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $30,000 shy this year. And I'm struggling with your revenue projections based on the performance of the past 3 years.
Well, I'm very happy to say that our bookings are tripled. We've even just secured a conference for 2019, which is the Mount Arrowsmith Rhododendron one. We've just secured the Quilters ongoing yearly thing for another 4 years. So there are large bookings that are coming in. So I'm sure we're going to manage.
Any further questions, Councillor Beale?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the detail in here. So if I understand that correctly, then the projection for increased revenue is not based solely on the increase of rental rates, but you are also seeing an uptake in the actual number of bookings. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for coming back to us again. Like Councillor Burton, and that I have a little bit of frustration in that as a business person primarily, knowing that forecasting higher revenues and higher bookings doesn't always occur as much as we would like them to. So Councillor Burton and I think are on the same wavelength, and that when I looked at the 9 months of your current and that, do you perceive to have a loss this year as well?
No.
No? Okay. Because we're missing those 3 months, so I can't.
Yeah, that's true.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Any further questions? I'd like to thank you, and thank you for the work that you've done, and of course thanking Lucky Butterworth for the good work that he's done. Seeing no further questions, Councillor Oates, do you want to make a recommendation?
Yeah, I'd like to move that we accept the Society's budget as presented tonight.
Seconded by Councillor Powell. Further discussion? Councillor Burton. Nope. Somebody else have her hand up first? Okay, you go first.
Yeah, I too have concerns about the budget, but I believe it's important that we pass the budget and have some confidence. But the society needs, I mean, you're obviously aware that we're watching very closely. You've set a high bar for yourself with your budget, and I wish you all the success in the world in achieving that.
Councillor Burton.
Yeah, pretty much echoed my thoughts. I will be really pleasantly surprised if you're able to achieve your numbers. Now, I understand, I guess through you to staff, The terms of the contract with the city, do we have any, it's a percentage that we pay and there's no fixed figures? Is that
Mrs. Keller?
done yet, or is that still able, are we still able to adjust that?
Mrs. Keller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The operating agreement that we currently have with the society is up for renewal, and that item has not been finalized at this point. We do anticipate bringing something back to council as soon as the society has had a chance to review the proposed agreement for 2017.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Beal?
Yes, I was just wondering, I did have one further question, if I may, and this is regarding the expenses, and again, looking at the actual and the third quarter, I noticed that that it is already over budget, but I was just wondering, is this on track? I mean, sometimes that's because things are paid out ahead of the end of the year, or are there additional expenses that are anticipated?
No, we are on track. The reason it looks that way is, as you said, our insurance is all one big whack right in August. So, of course, that really does affect the way the expenses look. I have been informed that we will be fronting the costs for the repair to the center, which will be about $5,000. The issue we are having is the roof was redone, but where the auditorium and the new section meet, there has always been a leak there, and it is starting to erode, so it needs to be addressed. It's leaking like a sieve. Paul has gone ahead and ordered the supplies, and because we have to pay the $5,000, it'll be our onus will be on us to pay it.
So thank you for that. So as I read this, then for this year, the expenses are about $1,200 over budget. Is that correct?
They are at this time with the figures you have, but we always critique right down as we get closer to make sure that we're not over on our expenses.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation. I just had a question about membership. I thought we had looked at your trying to increase your membership over time. Are you still going to be doing that, or?
We have already implemented it, and we have sent it out to all the users, and we actually have groups that have signed up already and are members.
Okay, because what I see in the budget is the same amount straight across the board at $400. Like, it's just right up to 2021.
That's under expenses. That's for when I become a member of a different association to do marketing.
Okay. So you don't expect that to increase?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, thank you.
So, members of council, are we ready to vote on the recommendation? We have a mover and a seconder. The council approve the budget for the PCC for 2017. My God, time goes by fast. Okay, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Let me see that again. All those in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much, and thank you once again.
Thank you.
Okay, our next delegation is MacDonald Gray Consultants, who are going to give us a presentation on the Rezoning Amendment Application for 451, 461, and 465 Hirst Avenue. Do we have anybody that's going to recuse himself? Oh, okay. I thought maybe. I didn't want to lose that opportunity just in case.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council and staff for receiving our delegation, and thank you to all those brave souls that braved the weather to get here tonight. Luckily, we downloaded our presentation right before the power went out of the office, so that was an extremely fortunate thing. I'm here tonight just to introduce the development proposal we have for Hirst Avenue, and I'll try to keep it to 10 minutes. If I go over time, I'm sure Kiva will remind me that I am talking too much, because I never do that. So just to give you a little context, you can see here the property is located on Hirst Avenue between Molliette and Finholm Street. The properties are quite large. There are 3 lots, and they are leftover lots from the good old days, probably from when this was in the RDN. They are quite large compared to a normal standard city lot. The current zoning is single family, RS1. The statement of intent is pretty simple, and it has been that way for some time. Even though these lots are, like I said, are oversized, they are still designated single family. You can see there the adjacency is just to the north of us. This is the Windsor Court strata development, and you can see densities kind of coming into this area over time, and that's also reflected in the official community plan and the vision for the city as it develops in the future. So when we look at the official community plan, the designation is transitional residential, and the statement of intent there, I won't read the whole thing, but essentially the big idea from a planning perspective is to blend between high density and low density single family. That's accomplished in a number of ways, and I'm sure you're all aware of the housing types that are mentioned therein. So you can see we are surrounded by what is designated high density residential. That's the 3, the orange, and this is the transitional piece between the light yellow, which is single family neighborhoods, to be retained for the duration of the OCP, and this piece we are right smack dab in the middle of for transitional residential. So before we even undertook any design of any kind, we went out and talked to all the neighbors. The green dots are the neighbors who actually made it out to our meeting. We hand-delivered invitations to each one of them to come and meet us at the conference center. And we rented a room there, and it was great. We had a presentation, and we showed them just a few examples of transitional housing types from the area. You can see Creekside and Stones Throw, Avalon, and some of the Craig Bay strata type development. The neighbors were really great, and we just sat there and collaborated and talked. Like I said, there was no plans, so it was just a conversation about what they wanted to see next door, essentially. So from that, we started developing a proof of concept for 20 ground-oriented units. We wanted to maintain the form and character of the neighborhood. The neighbors talked about 20 to 28 units, so we ended up at the low end, not because necessarily we just weren't trying to achieve high density. We wanted to achieve the right density, and so we worked with actually the architect from Stones Throw who did a number, and he would say too many floor plans. We probably did 20 or so floor plans to get to the right one, but the idea is we know the market, so we've talked about incorporating adaptive housing standards. That just means that the unit itself, the doorways are large, and all of these things are built into the code right now, whereas if you had somebody come in who needed who was less able, they could incorporate those features easily into these types of units. So quite a bit of upfront work went into that. We also looked at integrated stormwater management, so it's a collaboration between our landscape architect, who's sitting here in the audience, the engineer, and the architect on this project. While it sounds like that should always happen on projects, this is actually one of the ones where we did sit down and kind of hash it out in a charrette-style format. So we came up with quite a few unit types, and this is kind of a vision for the streetscape along Hirst, so maintaining a single-family height, single-story at the adjacency with the neighboring properties, and some 2 stories toward the center. 2-story units would be really aimed at more of a younger buyer, but they are, like I said, all adaptive to any type of person. A few other images, just looking at the site in general. It's all arranged around essential features, so this is all fire access rated, and the idea would that we drain the entire site, all the stormwater to that central piece, and then allow it to be released slowly into the stormwater system, whatever that ends up being, and I will come back to some of the engineering discussion in a second. This is just a view from the back of the property, looking out towards Hirst. you can see they are quite moderate-scaled, ground-oriented, medium-density housing types. It may even, I mean, from a planning perspective, we're kind of aiming towards low on a 20 units on this site. So the proposed zoning is RS2. It's a city standard zone. It's basically a medium-density residential. There is an ability to go to a higher density than what we're proposing, but we are proposing 20 units. And if you look at the statement of intent for this zone and compare it to the language in the OCP about what the community envisions for density here, the two marry and match quite well. So this is really the penultimate zone for alignment with the OCP and our project. So in terms of proof of concept, which is what this is, because we all know the next step in this process is development permit. So we will be going to that level after the rezoning is approved, should it be approved. So we have a basic traffic study from 2008. It was for quite a few more units. There was actually one for 80 units originally done for this site. It indicates a satisfactory level of service. Really nothing has changed in the neighborhood since 2008, with the exception of the school at the end of the road has now been changed to, I believe it's past Woodwinds now, where it was an elementary school before, so there may in fact be a reduction in traffic volume. And we provided preliminary sewer, water, fire flow, and some ideas on stormwater management. There is an issue with the drainage that goes into Banks Avenue right now from the properties. So essentially half of the property drains back to Banks Avenue, which is undeveloped, and the other half drains out towards Hirst. Right now, the houses are located towards the front. So all that sort of surface drainage is going into a manhole that actually flows under the Windsor Court strata. But that easement has never been established. So I understand there's a little hesitation to have us use that. We do have a couple options, including pumping to the front, that we'd like to discuss further with engineering in person, real time. So the conclusion from our engineers, the site can be developed with minimal impacts, and so that's basically what we look for when we're looking for a proof of concept, that the land use can be accommodated with the existing servicing available in the city. So we looked at the staff report. Hopefully I'm doing well for time, Kiva, sorry. The staff report seems to indicate that the land use proposal from a land use perspective is correct for the site. Staff has mentioned a couple things. We were a little surprised to see the denial, but that's fine. We can still work together after today. I think all the items in there are realistic and we're willing to look at. The commitment to restrict density, there wasn't a formal request, but from my perspective, we didn't want to assume council would want to limit the density because the language of the OCP is 20 to 40. Should it come out at our next public engagement session that the public really wants to see it limited to 20, we have no issue with that because the 20 is what we're proposing to do. When it comes to, and it's the low end of the OCP target, so we just don't want to presume council's intention when it comes to policy decisions on land use and on lands. In terms of universal design standards, we haven't suggested a mechanism. Our approach would be to do our own building scheme, so we would control that. If staff or council are not satisfied that that's sufficient to lock it in, we're willing to do a covenant or any other mechanism acceptable to the city to achieve that. The staff report's looking for more detailed servicing. All the reports and plans we provided, we feel are adequate to justify the land use. However, I do understand, and kind of if you look through between the lines, it looks like the off-site amenities are the piece that staff are looking for now, and we are willing to have that conversation with staff. The issue for us and the issue for the client is this is their third kick of the can, and they've spent quite a bit of money on this site, and I do have some empathy for that. So what they really want is a kind of some nod or some kind of assurance from council as policymakers that if they do engage in doing the detailed servicing on a specific development proposal, that it's not going to be money wasted. The issue for us is we have promised the neighbors that we would meet with them again after first reading, and the concern there is that the plan may change. We may go to the public and they may want to see changes in the building type and the layout of the site, and if we do it over and over again, we'll end up doing engineering study after engineering study and redesigning. So with some assurance that council agrees with the land use, we'd be more comfortable requesting that they spend the money on an engineering study that is more detailed based on an actual plan that the public has had a look at. Right now, we haven't taken any of this out to the public, so we're a little hesitant to just roll with a very detailed proposal. So what are we requesting of council? I think in our dream world, we'd get first reading tonight, and that would indicate that council supports the land use. We still can look at any number of items right up until third reading, or up until the public hearing, and not add any new information. Council can deny the application at any time during that period. And it would provide some assurance to the applicant that this is something that council wants to see on the site in terms of density. And it would offer us an opportunity to sit down with staff. We've done that recently on a couple other projects, and it was awesome. Staff were really good and really forthcoming. We had a real-time solution discussion about how to get to the end and have everybody comfortable with what's proposed. So I really ideally would like to get to that point and sit down with staff and hash it out. As I said, if we don't come to a decision, council can deny this application at any time. But that is where we are now, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Okay, questions for Mr. Gray. I'm going to go to Councillor Powell and then Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you very much for the presentation. I remember when the last proposal came through, and I remember the detail and the money that it cost to get there. And I recognize, too, that this is, since we've redone the OCP, this is what the land use calls for. And so one of my questions when this was coming forward is why the resistance to providing the reports that engineering requested. And I think you have explained that. And I just threw you to the Director of Planning. What would be the consequences to us if because it is in the OCP, this land use. And so what would the consequence be to the city or the cost as far as liability, etc.? Like, are we putting the cart before the horse?
Mr. Russell.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Powell. As far as liability on making a decision whether or not to forward the application or deny the application, council does not assume any liability, in my opinion, with making that kind of decision. Where the challenges come in is if there's insufficient services ultimately to support a development somewhere downstream beyond the frontage of the property, should they arise. So that's, again, so what would happen then is either someone may have a false sense that the property is developable a certain way, and the city may potentially be in a position to have to undertake some of those upgrade works, depending on the specific circumstances.
Follow up.
Thank you. And so would the proponent be willing to mitigate that for council?
Yeah, I think we need to look at what the off-site amenities are. So what we're essentially talking about is an amenities negotiation. And we are willing to undertake that. If they are too much, we will abandon it, obviously. If they can't afford to do it and the price just isn't right and it makes this not a feasible development and it's just not feasible, I think that we're all realistic people and we're all professionals and we can arrive at a real number that people can live with on both sides. So yeah, I think in terms of off-sites, the only risk is if you actually approve this bylaw, and that's at the end at fourth reading. Right now, there is no risk. Your discretion is unfettered right up until that point to deny this application.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Councillor Powell. Asked some of my questions in regards to servicing works. What you're proposing is 20 ground floor, basically works within the community. It's not 3 stories or 4 stories or anything. But if we were to rezone and go to the medium density, and that it could actually have quite a bit higher density proposed.
That's correct. However, you could put a site-specific restriction within the zoning saying on this lot the density shall be 20 units. Or we could write a completely separate bylaw, RS 2.1, and just make that one 20-unit density.
Okay. Follow up, Your Worship. Towards staff, 6B in our recommendation in our package is to deny this application or the amendment application. If staff, or if the council so chose to approve it, such as the proponents suggesting tonight, what are the repercussions?
If Your Mayorship, and if I may just address this now rather than at the time of the report presentation, basically at this point, staff are not in a position to provide any sort of guarantee that there's sufficient services. There probably is. The challenge is that going through a public process as staff, I don't want to shrug my shoulders and go that there's probably sufficient services. We would like to provide more of a level of guarantee to council that that is in fact the case. That being said, at the end of the day, services directly in front of the property, those will have to be provided at the time of building permit. But it does leave some uncertainty at this stage without additional information to satisfy the engineering department's request for information. At the end of the day, the engineering department, my understanding would be like to indicate to council that they're comfortable with the level of services that are provided and that those services are sufficient for the proposal. From my perspective, with respect to the density of use, when there's illustrations of a proposal, the public is quite apt to be very attached to those illustrations. So it needs to be clear that there are higher densities that are capable on the site, and that is why, from my perspective, it would be nice to have some kind of commitment to what that density, what the cap on that density may be, or it needs to be clearly stated that this is, an illustration and that really up to a certain number of units could be achievable fairly easily under the zoning. For all we know, the property could change hands a year from now. We don't know those sorts of things. So from my perspective, I really just want to provide a level of assurance to council and the community. And the denial was hopefully to get some, put the proponent, get some attention. It's not a strong denial recommendation, quite frankly. I mean, as far as the land use goes, I overall think it's an appropriate general use for that site. But I think they need to be, the applicant needs to be aware that that council and the community should have some level of assurance of what it provides. So.
Councillor Patterson. Anybody else? No.
Thank you, Worship. And not sure how to put this as a question, but I'd just like to echo that, I too just have some concerns that there are not assurances here that, I would like to see. I think that the proposal looks very nice. It really does seem as if the design considers the neighbors. It's not obtrusive. The single story to the 2 stories in the center, the layout, everything. I just not seeing assurances here that would be the limit of the density. And I wonder if it's one of these things like, the chicken and the egg. And so how do we get these things to come together so that there can be assurances both for the needs of the engineering department and the city, and assurances so that you can go forth to neighbors and present what looks like a fantastic proposal.
If I may, the density issue is not an issue for us at all. We're absolutely willing to lock it in, and always have been. It's just not possible to actually, frankly, to accommodate a properly sized ground floor unit on the property and have the turnaround and accommodate additional density. We could do more density, but the units would be terrible. And we did do a couple that were at 30 units on the site, and it was really awful row housing. And it's just not viable in our market or appropriate to the neighborhood. So.
Councillor Patterson, do you have another question? Another comment?
Comments, Your Worship. Turnaround time, I guess this would be a staff if we were to, give me a second. I'd like to see this moving forward, not backtracking, and then it just seems at this point 2 steps back and 1 step forward. So to put a bylaw that restricts the unit size, could that be done this evening, or would that require an amendment or a future reading?
If I may, Your Worship, The bylaw itself is not the only mechanism to restrict density. So a restrictive covenant could be a requirement that council imposes and requests of the applicant, which would not require a change to the bylaw.
Bruce?
So what I'm seeing here is the city wants guarantees and the proponent wants guarantees, and neither is willing to give that guarantee until they see, I don't know, the color of the other person's money, I guess. I don't know, for the want of a better term. What can we do tonight that won't go against the staff recommendation to deny the amendment application, but will give your group the confidence to move forward?
So first reading tonight would give us the confidence that council is seriously considering this proposal, and it would allow my clients who are they're in their later years and they've been doing development for a long time and are not used to the new requirements for development. It would give them the assurance that this thing will be moving forward, and that if they do what's requested in terms of more detailed analysis, that in the end, if they play ball, that it will be achieved. First reading would give the nod and not tie the hands of council to approve this at all in any way. As I said, new information can be received throughout the process, through the readings right up to the public hearing. So we could provide the additional information during that time to the satisfaction of staff. Or if we just can't find a way, we would withdraw the application.
Well, I like the look of what I saw, and I think it's, I assume it's an appropriate use for the property. And I'm concerned that the wrong message be sent back. But I'm also concerned that what you're asking us to do is directly flies in the face of what staff is suggesting that we do. So I'm struggling here to make this decision in 7 minutes. And I'd really hate to see the development not go ahead because council didn't start a process which I believe they could stop at any time. So I'm not, maybe this is a better for the CAO or the acting CAO. What liability would the city be? Would we be providing any assurances by doing first reading tonight that we couldn't get out of somewhere down the road?
That's for the acting CAO.
If I may, Your Worship, I think it's, from staff's perspective, it's entirely reasonable for if council feels that this would be a good development, appropriate development. Staff is certainly willing to work with the proponents, under the condition that if first reading is given, then staff get together with the proponent and we work on the additional information we need, confirm what makes us comfortable, and make sure that that's taken care of before it goes on to further readings. So I think that would be acceptable.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So from what I understand, staff need more information. Don't have it, have asked for it, haven't received it. And your clients want first reading before they're going to provide that information. Is that pretty much it?
In a nutshell, we have provided some information. There is additional information that could be provided. There are some complexities, as I tried to allude to the stormwater situation on the site and other items that are abnormal. So they would need to be looked at in more detail.
So, follow-up, Mr. Mayor? I have two things. So it's a financial issue? That's what the holdup is?
It's absolutely a financial issue.
Okay. And so, could we make a motion then that we would take this to first reading, providing that staff then get the information that's required?
If I may, Worship, through Councillor Salter, certainly Council could rise and report the bylaw for consideration of first reading and make a decision on that. Council could also request that additional information items as identified by staff be further addressed with the applicant, and that would then come back as part of the prior to second reading or concurrent with it.
So I would like to do that. Yeah. So he said what I was going to say, so. Well, no, that's a motion.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The item has some recommendations coming forward at the staff report that have some resolutions that we can amend if council sees fit at that time.
All right, any further questions for Mr. Gray? One more from Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. And so I think that I did speak with the Director of Planning earlier, and he said that it was not a hard denial. There was some wiggle room in there, and I think from my perspective, we just need to use common sense. It's already in the OCP. Let's move forward with it. From your explanations, Mr. Gray, it's the concerns that Council has brought up, you've addressed. I feel like it's assured, and so I don't think it is going against staff. I think it's taking in all the information. And thank you very much for your presentation.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Gray. We'll be discussing this in greater detail later, I would imagine. Okay, and I'm going to save my questions for the staff presentation. All right, we have completed that portion of the delegations, and we are now looking at the consideration of a development permit for tree removal and management at Oceanside Trails Resort, 1135 Resort Drive. I need a mover and a seconder for the two recommendations. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Burden. Mr. Russell, would you please give us the background on this issue?
Sorry, Worship. I'm just trying to find my place here. So before get a bit of an echo. For council consideration this evening is consideration of issuing a development permit that will allow for the maintenance and potential removal of 26 trees on a property in total, out of a property that has 549 protected trees. So it's a fairly heavily treed property, and in staff's opinion, this is a fairly modest request as part of routine maintenance of such a heavily treed site. The recommendations are as per the agenda to consider issuing the permit.
Any questions for Mr. Russell on this particular item? Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had one question. I know the original, so they want to cut down 8 trees to start with, and then there's 18 that they're considering for future. So if we support this, are we talking about all 26 all at once?
If I may, Worship, through to Councillor Salter, all 26 trees would be authorized for removal. However, 18 of the trees would be subject to some conditional changes. So it's not an instant removal of those other 18. It's when an arborist determines that their condition has become more negative.
So I just have a follow-up. So the arborist would then reassess those trees at a later date?
Through to Councillor Salter, yes, that is correct.
Any further questions for Mr. Russell? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. So we're back to Hirst Avenue. Do you wish to depart for a little while? Councillor Burden? Don't go too far away. Okay, first of all, we all know what this is about. We just finished discussing it in quite a bit of detail. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendations in the report? Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Mr. Russell, let's have the background on this issue of 451, 461, and 465 Hirst Avenue.
If I may, Worship, so I'm not going to speak too much here. I think a lot has already been discussed on the application, but for council consideration is an application to rezone the 3 properties that you've just mentioned there, from their current single-family RS1 zone to a proposal for a medium-density residential RS2 zone. The applicant has shown illustrations of 20 units. Some further details on density are provided in the report, and then the recommendation is per the agenda. Anyways.
Just before I go to members of council, what, in your opinion, are the key lacking information that, or what's the key points that are missing in the report for you to recommend that the application be denied? Could you give us that in short order? From staff's perspective, this is really to kind of get the applicant's attention that these are important items. So as I've discussed with other councillors, this isn't a strong recommendation for denial, but what it is I hope that the items that are requested would be taken seriously, so that that the applicant is aware that there's importance to provide this level of assurance. Staff is quite open to alternatives. There is a couple options on the agenda for council consideration. On page 39, the paragraph before the options, the second last paragraph, you say here, the fire department indicates that the fire flow calculations to ascertain that the fire flow capacity requirements can be satisfied by the proposal have not been provided. Is that something that is it something that's key before we move on?
If I may, Your Worship, the challenge is that rezoning is really one of the few opportunities that the city has to secure those items. So I'm not prior to public hearing and prior to a bylaw being adopted, the city needs to have those items secured, because otherwise we're limited to the works directly in front of the subject property to the center line of the road. And if there's an insufficient capacity in one of the pipes beyond that, then we don't have an opportunity to achieve that infrastructure from the developer. And so that is why we would want information prior to public hearing that those services for water service, sewer service, drainage service, and the fire flow calculations for a proposal like this under the zoning are achievable.
Okay, moving on to members of council. Councillor Powell, who's after Councillor Powell? Councillor Oates?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Patterson, all right.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move this in order to put it on the floor to speak to it. I don't support the denial. I would like to say that the concerns you brought up, I think the proponent spoke to them tonight. At first reading, he would be providing the information that was requested, and I think that would mitigate most, if not all, of our concerns. And so I'm not sure where to move forward with this. Maybe Councillor Oates can help me out.
Councillor.
No, I think most of council may support a different recommendation. That would mean, I think Councillor Salter said earlier as well, to rise and report and move to have a first reading and move to have a first reading and to have the additional items that have been identified by staff in this report and that have been recognized by the proponent prior to or before public hearing. That's a motion. Or I can't. Well, that's what I'd like to. There is a motion on the floor, and but that's what I'm
Councillor Oates?
anticipating.
Yeah, I'll try it a different way. I'll move referral of the issue back to staff with direction to work with the proponent to close the gap so that the denial recommendation won't come forward. We need a seconder.
Okay, who's going to second that? Councillor Salter's going to second that. Okay. Move. What? Not now? I have no choice. Thank you. I didn't know that. I thought I had to go back to the original motion. Okay, we're going to vote on that motion. Do you want to give it to us again, Councillor Oates?
That the motion is to refer it back to staff with direction to work with the proponent to close the gap so that the next time it comes back before council, there's not a recommendation to deny.
Okay, so we have a seconder for that. Any discussion on the motion?
No, you can't.
Do you want to say something about the motion?
If I may, Your Worship, sorry, I just want to make sure that certainly I'm clear on it. So it's not to give first reading, to just refer back to staff so that when it comes back again. Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. No discussion. Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Wait a minute. All those in favor? 3 opposed. That motion is defeated. Okay, we're back to square one. Councillor Keller. Councillor Keller, I'm sorry. I just demoted you. You don't want to be a councillor, no? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe that council could, you just moved and seconded the recommendations on the agenda. I think that you could either consider them, vote on them separately, choose the first item, and then deny or defeat the second item, and then replace it with either something along the lines of what Councillor Oates said, to refer it back to staff, or to consider the first reading if that's what council would like to do. That way we can remove the second item for denial off the agenda and give us a different motion from council at that time.
So recommendation number 1 by the original mover and seconders is that it be received. So we'll take a vote on that. All those in favor that it be received, thank you. That is carried. Now, recommendation number 2. I'm looking at you.
We need to vote on the second piece. Okay, and then we start over for the second piece. Okay.
So we have a mover and a seconder for
Yes.
the second item. Which
Yes.
we did with those. Okay, that's right. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, you understand? Yeah. Okay, all those in favor of the motion as written on your books to deny. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is defeated. All right.
Just for clarity, what does that actually mean now? The motion to deny was defeated, so does that mean that it was approved?
I think we need a new motion.
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
We need a new motion, so who wants to make that new motion? Do you want to make that new motion?
I don't want to make the motion. I just wanted to speak to, okay, I'll make the motion, which was to refer back to staff, but to refer back to staff, but not to expect staff to bring forward an approval. It would have to be staff coming forward with whatever happens. They would make a decision at that point. We can't. I don't believe that we could direct staff to take it back to referral and direct them to bring it back to us when they're ready to approve, because that may or may not happen.
Well, I was just going to, yes, all right, go ahead. I'm going to bring something up.
We've already defeated a motion to refer, and we cannot do another referral motion because it's already been defeated.
All right. So what do we do, Mrs. Keller?
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may make a suggestion, I believe that council could, so we've already defeated item number 2. So a new resolution or motion could be that if council does not wish to grant first reading to the bylaw this evening, that they could direct staff to work with the applicant to obtain additional information and report back to council at the earliest opportunity. That's good.
That's awfully like the second option. No, not quite? No. All right, okay. So would you read that, say that again, please?
So something along the lines of, so council could make a motion that directs staff to work with the applicant to obtain additional information on servicing for the proposed development and report back to council.
Okay, do I have
Or you could give first
somebody that'll move that?
I'll move it.
You'll move it, Councillor Salter. Do I have a seconder for that recommendation? You'll second it? Okay, so discussion on the, I have to go to Councillor Beal.
Thank you. When I heard Mrs. Kaler read that the first time, I did also hear that we would be advancing it to first reading. Is that correct?
If council wished to do that, that could be an option at this point, but that's not how I read it out, but that.
So the motion as it reads is very much like the recommendation, option number 2, is it not?
Yes, I think it's similar intent in that they would not be getting first reading tonight. If council did wish to advance it to first reading, we can do that. Council could ask, could pass a motion or suggest a motion that they be given first reading and it referred back to staff to work on those items, if that's something that council wishes to do, or just, I guess, maybe not denying is a different message to send.
Thank you for the confusion. All right, so what I think the motion that was just put forward is exactly what we tried to refer, and it's going to leave the proponent in the exact same spot as they were when they got here. And so I'm not going to support this for those reasons, and I think what we need to do is step up to the plate and approve the first reading so that they can move forward and come back with what we need.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So that is what I drafted, so I can read that out if that's what council wishes to do for first reading. Is the motion would be something that council read bylaw number 2000.104 a first time and direct staff to continue working with the applicant to obtain additional information on the servicing for the proposed development prior to the public hearing was what I had suggested.
Is that okay with you? What about the movers and the seconders? Is that okay with them? Yeah. Councillor?
Yes, that's what I first of all heard, and then that second time reading it was different, but that is the motion that I would want to support.
Councillor Salter, is that okay with you? You were the mover.
Yeah, no.
No?
So I would ask that someone else make a motion, please.
Can I do that?
I'll withdraw my motion.
Wait a minute, let me talk. Can I do that? Pardon me?
Can I not
Okay,
withdraw
so
that motion?
Let's call the vote on the motion that...
I'm withdrawing my motion, though, so you don't have to defeat it if I withdraw.
Okay? So the motion's withdrawn? So you're okay with that? Okay, so now we need another motion that... you'll make the motion that Mrs. Kaler just gave us. Who's going to second it? Councillor Beal's going to second it. All right. Now, on that new modified, remodeled motion, any further discussion? I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay, we're moving on here. Would somebody please retrieve Miss Councillor Burden? We haven't gotten quite to new business yet. Okay. All right, the next item we have is the Chestnut Street Traffic Calming Program. I need a mover and a seconder for the two recommendations. Moved by Councillor Burden, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Mr. Figuera, would you please give us the background on this issue?
If I may, Your Worship, before Council is a report to obtain Council approval to enter Chestnut Street into the traffic calming program. In August of 2016, a petition was received requesting traffic calming measures on Chestnut Street. Staff assisted the applicant in following the city traffic calming policy. A survey of the affected residents was completed, and sufficient support was obtained, confirming speeding as an issue for the residents. Staff collected speed data confirming that speeds exceed the posted speed limit, which is at 40 kilometers an hour right now. So it's being exceeded by 10 to 12 kilometers an hour. That's the 85th percentile. According to policy, this qualifies Chestnut for entry into the traffic calming program, and staff recommendations are as per the report.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Figuera? Councillor Burton?
So I'd like to see it extended to Hirst because it's a speedway. I guess my questions are around what sort of a response have we had from the RCMP and what is the cost of public education?
If I may, Your Worship, those are the sorts of things that if Council approves it to get into the policy, the traffic calming program, those are the sorts of things we'll start digging into in terms of there's different levels. There's an education component, there's some also, it could eventually get into actual on-the-ground construction to try to traffic calm the situation. But according to our policy, by staff supporting this, it will allow the staff to put some resources towards doing some traffic calming.
RCMP?
If I may, Your Worship, in terms of the RCMP have been working with staff on a connecting street, Despard. I am not entirely sure how much they've done on this particular road, Chestnut Street, but one of the things that we will be doing is consideration of enforcement. That's what, if Council supports this, we'll be able to get into having discussions with the RCMP about enforcement, signage, education, and eventually, if none of that seems like it's working or workable, then we get into potential capital investment situation, in which case we would be coming back to Council to identify what we've done, if it has, why we think it hasn't worked, and why we think we need to enter into more of a capital upgrade to address the speeding issues.
So we lowered this. I mean, I remember having, when the delegation came, I was in the gallery there, and they came and we lowered the speed limit to 40 kilometers an hour. I'm mystified as to why we have to come back to Council to get enforcement, and why the heck aren't the RCMP out there? We could pay $2.8 million a year. Why can't they park a car on Chestnut? Not really a question.
Okay, Councillor Oates.
No, I'm going to pile on where Councillor Burton left off, because it seems to me that speed is an issue on Chestnut Street, it's an issue on Hirst, it's an issue on Despard, it's an issue on the Island Highway, it's an issue on the Alberni Highway. And why are we not generating revenue from all these lead-footed drivers? I'm fully in favor of it. We want to talk. One of the main complaints we hear about is the ability for pedestrians to wander around down near the Island Highway, and you know, it's called a highway for a reason, because people come screaming through there. For me, lower the speed limit is a simple solution, and then start enforcing it. Nothing gets reaction like someone picking at your wallet. So I think we should be giving, if it's within our ability, we should be giving direction to the RCMP to start enforcement there, or dare I say it, photo radar? I don't know. You know, you go down there and you try to cross down there, and the traffic. We can sit and we can talk about it. We can do traffic studies. We can bitch and we can moan, or we can do something. We have the law there. Why don't we just have the law upheld?
I think we can get a hold of the commanding officer. I do believe it's got a lot to do with resources or lack of resources, but we can talk to him about it. I know that I see now more and more. I saw one last night where somebody was arrested for speeding on 19A. I'd like to see a lot more of it. When we've talked about this over the years with regards to 19A, my experience has always been it's a lack of resources. You can't have police cars on Chestnut, on Despard, and on other streets all at the same time. We just simply don't have the horses for that. So we can get that information directly from the RCMP. Let's invite them to come and make a presentation as to what we heard tonight about the complaints with regards to speeding on our roads. I mean, I'm a prime example. I travel 19A every day. It is a speedway. Everybody's going 60, 70, 75, 80 kilometers an hour. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I have a kind of a little tangent because we just assigned all our liaison positions and everything. And what I would like to see is a council liaison to the RCMP so some of these issues can be discussed. So I would like you to meet with our staff sergeant and assign a councillor to be a liaison and bring issues like this forward so that we do not have just 2 visits from the staff sergeant a year, but we have a liaison position and that we have some of these issues addressed in calming measures in some of our areas of the community. And we can find out if it's a staffing or money issue or what say you and that. But I think that we need to have a better discussion.
We used to, as a matter of fact, I was talking to another councillor about that today, and I thought it might come up from that other councillor before you did. But we used to have a representation to the RCMP and the fire department. And for some reason along the way, it dropped off. So I'll do that. I'll get a hold of the commanding officer and the fire chief, and we'll talk about that, set that up again. Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Worship. And I too am very concerned about traffic safety for all people in their cars and pedestrians and cyclists and so on. And I agree. I would like to see this a higher priority. And I don't think that it is just I don't know. Obviously, I'm not there, but in terms of resources, my understanding is that we do help set some priorities, and if traffic safety is a priority for us and for our residents, then I think the RCMP will want to assist with our priorities. I also think that if we pay attention to some of these seemingly smaller things, that some of the larger things take care of themselves. So I would love to see this, and thank you, Councillor Patterson, for your suggestion.
I've just returned from a few days in the city of Edmonton visiting my grandkids, and on a lot of the streets in Edmonton, they have the speed limit, and under that they have a sign saying radar enforced. And I gather they do that on a regular basis. That's why you want to see other people pay. Councillor Burton.
So I would like to withdraw my motion, and I would like to look at option number 2, and I believe staff knows what the alternate direction is.
Councillor Beale.
My understanding from the recommendation, this is following a policy and a process that staff has worked on over this past year to implement something that addresses traffic calming issues. And I don't believe, and Mr. Figueroa will correct me if I'm wrong, that moving from stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, maybe they don't have to happen in that particular order, that maybe some of them might happen simultaneously, or that one might be very brief, but that those 3 elements are part of the whole process that has been put in place so that the engineering department can address these issues without coming back to council for every step of the way.
Councillor Burton.
I guess I just want to redirect resources from the staff within the city to the staff at the corner of Pym and 19A.
But I'm just wondering out loud if the RCMP wouldn't come back to us and say, we'll get involved, but we should be doing stage 1 and stage 2 and stage 3. Would you not? I don't know. Councillor, Mr. Figueroa.
If I may, Your Worship, the traffic calming policy that was recently passed sets in motion a series of steps that staff follow. And right now we're at the stage where we've got public support that there is an issue in their mind, the people that live along that street, so that's clear. The survey was done. We also have data that's supporting that there is an issue there. So our recommendation is to enter the street into the program. That will then go through a number of stages, some of which are enforcement, some of which are education, some of which are maybe some signage that we could put in place to help educate people and get them to slow down. It sort of starts the ball rolling so staff can start putting resources towards this. And one of those things would be meeting with the RCMP to identify that, to inform them that there is an issue, and to try to get an understanding of what sort of resources they have or their ability to do anything to assist us with trying to get the speeds down on that street.
I think Councillor Burton will have another comment.
I'd just like to stop being nice. There are speed limit signs out throughout the city. They're ignored by I don't know how many of the drivers. I did just finish reading the traffic study as well, which tells me that 20% are within the 85th percentile, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I just want to see some enforcement. I live there. I live on Hirst. It's a speedway. I drove home tonight with a guy in front of me playing in the snow with a huge truck. And if he had, well, he did lose control, but he didn't lose it to the point where he was smashing into the parked cars along the side of the street. But it was really close. I want to see that stopped.
But you recognize again that there's not, we're whistling Dixie if we think we're going to see an RCMP patrol car on every street in town to keep the traffic at a minimum to the speed limit. That's not going to happen, realistically. Who are you next? You're next, and then Councillor Salter.
Thank you. And not to prolong this, but just a point of clarification, and again, Mr. Figuera will correct me if I'm wrong, but the word enforcement here does imply the RCMP, does it not? So that is, in fact, it's not our staff taking that time.
Councillor Salter and then Councillor Oates.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My feeling is that we do need to do our homework before we do go to the police at any rate and say, look, we need you to get out on the street here and, you know, get a couple of cars or whatever it is that we want the police to do. Enforcement is part of that. So we start with part one, then we go to part two. Well, we look, this is what we've done. Nothing's changed. Now we need some enforcement. I believe that's what this speaks to. Am I correct? That's the next piece, is going for enforcement. Is that correct? So that's what you're asking for, and I think that's what's here.
Councillor Oates. Sorry.
No, I can respond to that. That is the case. This evidence we have, the data we've taken, it supports that there is speeding occurring. And it gives us some sort of ammunition when we go to the, I hate to use that word, but anyways, when we go to the RCMP, it allows them to see, yes, there's some data here that's confirming that there is a speeding issue, and we work with them to try to use enforcement to try to do something about it. If that doesn't work, then we go to the next step. Okay, what do we got to do now to try to lower those speeds?
Councillor Oates.
Thank you, Worship. I believe we should pass this motion, the recommendations in there. There's a policy in place to do it. They've obviously been working with the community to do that. This has evolved into a discussion about a general concern among council with respect to speed. Once we deal with this motion, I'll make a motion that'll deal with that.
Did we have a seconder? Councillor Oates.
Yes, Your Worship.
Remember, you can't fix stupid.
No, but you can certainly have a lot of fun with them. I'd like to make a motion, and the motion would be that we invite an RCM representative to a council meeting to discuss council's growing concerns regarding speed and options available to us to reduce speed.
Seconded by Councillor Burton. Any discussion?
I think, Your Worship, that we bring the RCMP in here, tell them that it's become a growing concern. We're receiving emails. People are talking about it. It is a legitimate concern. We have a policy that the citizens can use to identify where there are concerns, and I'll tell you it is a pretty. I remember when this came up. I believe this policy was born out of the Foster Park thing, I believe, right? So the procedure that the citizens have to go through in order to get to this stage is you got to jump through a lot of hoops. So it certainly demonstrates factually that there's a problem there. So this would be a good time for us to bring to the RCMP and say, look, in addition to this one neighborhood who have done their homework and provided that, we have a general concern with things like Despard at 8:30 in the morning and the Island Highway anytime. And so I think we could, maybe the RCMP could tell us about what has happened in other jurisdictions and options that we have to do something about it. And if in the end that it is resources, and I'm quite willing to vote to put the resources to it. It's a big enough problem. People want it fixed. If they want it fixed, that means they're willing to pay for it. So let's get it fixed before something really bad happens down there. The speeds are increasing. This time last year, you could come out there on Shelley Road there by Parksville Chrysler, and you could get out, no problem. You go down there now and try to get out there. They're soon going to be coming and talking about putting a light in there. That's how busy this place is. We're not getting a slowdown in the winter like we used to. So speed is a concern, and I think this is a good opportunity to remind us that it is a concern. So let's support this, get someone from the RCMP to come in here and see if they can offer some options for us to generate some money and reduce the speed at the same time.
By the way, there will be a light down on Shelley Road in front of Parksville Chrysler. There's going to be a light put in there when the apartment building is completed. So good stuff. Okay. I've often volunteered to do 19A for the RCMP, but they won't take me up on it. That's another story. Okay, are we ready to vote? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay, always an interesting topic, speeding in Parksville. This is the 2017 meeting dates. Yeah, that's. Anybody have any objection to that? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. So your 2017, your days are booked for the whole year. We have to ask someone. After meeting dates, the only thing I have is the contract for the District of Chamber of Commerce. I don't have anything else on my agenda. I go from on my report from I have some staff. The next item is the Parksville and District Chamber of Commerce fee-for-service agreement. So, Mr. Burton, we bid you farewell once again.
If you look at the agenda.
What about me?
This, I got it. I got it. Here. Okay. You don't have it?
Okay, on the next item is the Parksville and District Chamber of Commerce 2017 fee-for-service agreement. And I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Beale. Mrs. Kaler, would you please give us the report on this? I think everybody's fairly copacetic. There's no change much from last year.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this is for the 2017 fee-for-service, and the only change is basically to reflect the changes in the Consumer Price Index, so an increase of 2.1%. The rest of the clauses remain unchanged, and recommendations are per the agenda.
Thank you. I gather there's no questions on this. We've all read it. It's fairly straightforward. You have a question, Councillor Oates?
We don't have any input on the staffing for that, do we? No?
Councillor Powell?
I would just like to make note that, well, on the agenda on the front of our minutes, it has this next. In our actual minutes and reports, it's on page 89, because I noticed quite a few people said they didn't have it. And so maybe make note of that at the next council meeting to make sure they're all in order.
So I'm going to call the vote for this Chamber of Commerce agreement for 2017. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. So please retrieve Councillor Burton. You like that, eh? So now, members of council, we're moving on to bylaws. And we have the final adoption of the 5-year provisional financial plan bylaw 2017-2021, number 1533. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Beale. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay. All right, we're moving on to new business, and I have a number of items, but I'm going to go around the table first. I'm going to start with Councillor Patterson. New business.
No, thank you. I just wish everyone a Merry Christmas and seasonal greetings, because this will be our last meeting of council for 2016.
Another year. Councillor Oates.
Yes, I have one motion and then one comment I'd like to make. The motion is that council support the Bike BC Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure grant application by the City of Parksville for funding for the Jensen Avenue Greenway project, and that council support the Jensen Avenue Greenway project and commits to its share of the project. Okay, so this thanks to staff, they found another opportunity for us to possibly get some more money. The number we're looking at is somewhere a little bit north of $300,000. Half of that would be $150,000. Nobody is saying no, so that's about the kind of money we're applying for. It's an application to Bike BC to support the Jensen Avenue Greenway project identified in the Corfield Street Capital Project road improvements. The Greenway project is a multi-use trail linking Corfield to Evergreen, Bagshaw, McVicker Street. The 445-meter trail will be 3 meters wide and is intended to strengthen east-west bike route links as well as access to downtown and a bicycle link to Qualicum Beach. Construction is estimated to begin in the spring, and staff is currently working on the grant application, which is due December 15th. That's the reason why I bring it before you tonight. Yeah. And if you could indulge me for a minute, usually every year at Christmas time I go up and I make my donation up at SOS, and this year I chose to do it a different way. I went to the Tinamera breakfast thing last week on the 30th there. I was there early in the morning in the rain. It was raining quite heavy. I was shocked at the number of vehicles that were there. It was just such a great event, and hats off to the staff there and to the people of Parksville that came out. I have 3 grown boys, so I don't get to go Christmas shopping anymore. I understand that there's a shortage for teenage boys, so my only hope is that the teenage boys that I went shopping for get as much pleasure out of it as I did buying it, because it brought me back quite a few years, and I must say it was a really feel-good event for me, and something that this community should be applauded for. And Tinamera especially. And I was really moved by what I saw there last Wednesday morning, and I just thought it appropriate that I mention it here at council tonight.
I think we're amazed. Parksville and surrounding areas are a very, very generous community. And when you go to, before Christmas, if you drop in at the SOS and look at their room that is filled with all kinds of toys and food baskets and clothing, it's amazing. Thank you for bringing that up. That's a very excellent event. Councillor Powell. Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a few things, and just to add to Councillor Oates' comments, yes, although I couldn't be there for that event, I had a lot of fun this year shopping for every age category to get toys and other items for the SOS. And the angel trees around town are also a great help when anyone's stuck for a particular item. Anyway, it was great fun since my son only seems to want edible things. It's just a little different going shopping. I also wanted to mention that I have attended the Vancouver Island Regional Library Board meeting recently, and it was that time of year when there will be changes in the executive, and nothing too much to report there, but it is a very involved meeting when I do attend, and it takes the better part of the morning. And one can always look online at the Vancouver Island Regional Library website and find information about the board meetings, and the agenda packages starting in January will be available 5 days ahead of the meeting, and as soon as possible after the meeting, unapproved minutes will be posted. So that will speed up that reporting in case someone is interested in wanting to follow up and see what kind of work we do there. I also wanted to mention that I covered Coffee with Council just this past Thursday, and there were a number of interesting and interested residents who came by, including someone from the Greater Nanaimo Bicycle Cycling Coalition, who was here to look at the Transportation Master Plan and hopes to provide some feedback and observations about that. And also interested people wanting to talk about preserving views of the beach and the area when and if properties are developed along the beachfront. And finally, a lot of thought had gone into someone's presentation about and thoughts about the transit service for the area. Some very concrete, some very practical suggestions, some of which I will bring to council in the new year, and others that will be most appropriate to take on to the RDN and the actual transit folks there. I also want to mention a couple of upcoming events. This Thursday, December 8th, the school district, along with the RCMP and a local doctor, will be presenting a presentation on drug education, including fentanyl and how it affects our community, and that will be at the Community and Conference Center this Thursday, December 8th, from 6:30 to 8:30. So that event is open to parents, of course, but also to the general public. So that might be of interest for people here. And finally, although it's not taking place till February, I have started a team for the coldest night of the year walk. That will be February 25th. So if any of you here at the table or out there would like to make donations before the end of this year, seeing as how you do get a tax receipt if it's $20 or more, I just want to provide that opportunity for you. And otherwise, of course, I'll be happy to take donations in the coming year, and you can do that online or in person. So either myself or join the team. You're welcome to join the team. The team is called Gimme Shelter, and I think that we all, hopefully we all know that we have an amazing dedicated group here in the area working towards getting a long-term solution for the issue of homelessness, and we are very close. I know there's still some things that need to get in place, but hopefully that will be coming soon. The funds that are raised will go a long way to assisting with any operating costs in the short term, in the interim, and also looking ahead. So please save some change for that good cause. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beale. Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have anything to report tonight, but I would also like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a happy holiday season, and everyone drive safe.
Councillor Burton, your first Christmas with City Council?
Maybe. I also attended the SOS Tinamara breakfast. I've been doing it for, matter of fact, I flipped pancakes there last year. It's always a really good event, and it sort of gets that whole Christmas spirit and Christmas season flowing. I also spent a significant amount of time last week at the traffic report open house. Got some interesting comments from people, which I'll keep in store for when that comes forward to council. And I've been invited with my other hat on to attend a meeting called by the Ministry of Highways to discuss the block of road on 19A that's not in the city from the Orange Bridge through to Grigg Road. That's on Wednesday. So I'm looking forward to that as well, and you know, using what I gleaned from our own traffic study. I think that there's a lot of things that possibly we can incorporate if we could get some cooperation in that one block strip. And I do wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I will contribute to, and maybe even participate, but you know, I need to obviously defray the enormous increase in income that I've received over the last month. So I'm going to need that tax receipt.
Okay, I have a number of things that I'd like to bring up. The first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to thank everybody in the audience for coming tonight, because the weather hasn't been too cooperative. The Master Transportation Plan with the open house was held last week. I believe it was on December the 1st, and I was with my grandkids, so I'll have to get busy and bone up on that. The plan is available for review on the city's website, and residents are encouraged to provide comments through an online survey until December 30th. The first council meeting of 2017 will be on January the 16th, 2017. I'm getting my 17s confused again. I hope that everyone has a chance to drive along Alberni Highway in Parksville and experience the lights on the trees, which look quite wonderful. This was done by our friends in the PDBA. And I got a call one night there's an older couple where I live, and they don't drive at night, so I took them in my car and drove. They wanted to see the lights on Alberni Highway, and they were quite impressed, and wanted to make sure that their appreciation was given to the PDBA. The last Coffee with Council for 2016 will be this Thursday, which is December the 8th, from 2 to 4 p.m. here at City Hall. And a Coffee with Council will start up again on January the 12th. The other thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to thank Councillor Patterson. I failed to do that the last time, for attending on a very rainy day, the November 11th Remembrance Day, and I gather that was very, very well attended in spite of the rain, and so it should be, because you know, this whole Armistice Day is becoming more and more. It used to be about the First World War and the Second World War and the Korean War, but now there's a lot more wars that are involved. I wanted Council to know that I got a request from the Parksville Qualicum Beach Tourism Association to send a letter, which I'll be gladly doing on your behalf. We did one on January the 14th, 2016, to host the Tourism Vancouver Island Conference, 2017 conference. They weren't selected, but they want to apply once again for the 2018 conference, so I'll be gladly doing that on your behalf. And lastly but not least, it just so happens this year that Hanukkah and Christmas are on the same day. So I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, and a Happy New Year, and a healthy and happy and prosperous New Year for everybody. And on that note, yes, Councillor Bird.
One more thing.
You're entitled to one more thing.
That I've just been reminded of. Hockey Night in Canada is looking for
that's right.
interested communities to apply to host a play-on-street hockey tournament. The tournament is to be put on at no cost to Hockey Night in Canada. Of course, they don't have any money, and will require a 3-year commitment from participating cities. The city would have to close a street for 3 days over a weekend, part of our traffic calming process. Between the months of May and August, the cities must enter into a 3-year commitment. Participating cities must provide a $20,000 annual hosting fee to Play On Canada and adhere to a number of commitments for volunteer recruitment, prize recruitment, and coordination of all logistics associated with hosting the event. So I would like to move that staff be directed to investigate the direct and indirect costs to the city for participation in the Hockey Night in Canada Street Hockey Tournament and report back to Council.
Seconded. I sent that to everybody, so you should all have that, had a look at it by now. Any discussion on that particular motion? Seeing none, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Oh, that's carried. Thank you very much. So now, yes, Councillor Patterson.
Sorry, Your Worship, I was remiss in the light-up of the Downtown Business Association and the Sequoia tree, which you were a part of, so I just wanted to mention.
You were remiss. I was really, I lit the tree, and I didn't get electrocuted.
So it was it was lovely. I do have to say that I'm not sure whether the amount of extra people out and everything had anything to do with my lights being stolen, but at downtown, in the downtown core. But it's lovely to see the light up.
It was, yeah, and it was more people than last year. It's growing year by year, and the kids are really awesome. The fire truck was there, our new fire truck, with the lights flashing, and there was about a 3-year-old little boy, and I said, well, do you want to get into the cab and pretend you're driving the truck? And he said, no, I want to watch the flashing lights. Get out of my face.
Yeah,
so it was pretty interesting.
And again, merchants and other businesses and the community stepped up, and I think they did another 6 days of being able to house and have staff available for homeless shelter.
Well, we're all having, sure, go ahead. It's Christmas time, or almost Christmas time.
Thank you. And I would just like to add a really, really sincere big shout out to our staff, who were the ones who put up the lights along the Alberni Highway. Thanks to the PDBA for bringing forth the idea and contributing to the cost of the lights. But our staff did yeoman's work getting all that electrical in place and the light up, and they do look fantastic. Thank you.
And I'm just going to interject because it's our last meeting, and that and say very much the same as Councillor Beale. But I also love the tables and chairs down in the community park and that too. So again, a huge thank you and that to staff so that moving forward into 2017, it's
we don't
awesome.
Thank staff enough, do we? Really don't. Okay. So on that note, we're going to go, I need a mover and a seconder pursuant to Section 90 of the Community Charter. Council proceed to